Hello and welcome, beautiful ones. It is another beautiful Monday, if a Monday can be beautiful. Today's topic is parallel dimensions, and this goes hand in hand with the whole self-love, self-care type of stuff. But I kind of wanted to move into a more metaphysical plane with self-care, self-love, all that kind of stuff. So we are going to discuss parallel universes. This does kind of sort of go hand in hand with imposter syndrome, a little bit, in certain aspects at least. So if that's something you're dealing with, then this topic may be beneficial. Parallel dimensions. So whether they are real or imagined, they can still benefit us in some way. I know that there's been a lot of progress being made in the realm of quantum physics, and there is still the debate on whether or not that is a quasi-science or whether it is a true science or what's going on there. So there's a lot of discussion and controversy with quantum physics, including the parallel dimension, time travel, all that kind of stuff. So then we come down to the spiritual, the philosophical, imagination, the possible science aspects of it. And this brings us to what is it really? And for this purpose, I'm going to say try not to overthink that. Try to maintain it in the sense of philosophical and imagination and spiritual, because those things don't necessarily need proof to exist, but we can utilize them in ways that can help us to move forward. So that's one thing I want to mention here. Let it work for you in whatever way that you receive it. And if you really want to get into the quantum physics aspects, there's a lot of information out there about it. So moving on, imagination can make us see things so differently. Without imagination, nothing is real. Christo and Claude, they were some amazing artists. They had visions. They took their art to the next level and they made it happen. And they had the foresight to see different aspects of that, from how they could bring jobs and how they could bring materials to these places that normally would not have gotten them. They would go to these, they would basically kind of scope out all these different areas and see where they felt they could implement a structure that would complement nature. So if the sun was rising in a certain spot, they would put these sheets that ran along so that the sun would look like it was coming up over the sheets. And it was way prettier than it sounds. You can look up information about them and actually see their art, see them in progress, and see them talking about things. But it'd be maybe like a really long orange cloth that would just stretch out for miles, and then the sun would rise over it, and so this cloth would be illuminated and it would just kind of go with the skyline. So they would actually put a lot of time into this, not only because we know what time the sun comes up every day, just about, but then in different seasons it changes, the skyline changes, the colors change, all these other things. So they would take that into consideration when they would visit different places and decide what they wanted to do. Well, they would go to these really remote areas, and sometimes they would be combated because people didn't want something new. They'd say anybody can hang a sheet, and anybody could, but they had to get these crews out there. They had to get these tractors, and they had to get people that were going to actually erect these giant steel beams and put the material up, because like I said, these were mile-long materials. They just stretched for miles and miles. So they would erect these structures. And another thing was environmentalists were really on top of that as well, because they didn't want anything to affect the wildlife in the area. But to my knowledge and to the studies, the wildlife was not affected. They would take the steel beams down after a while, and they would distribute the materials to the farmers and to the people who lived and worked there. And they brought jobs by having people running these forklifts and these tractors and cranes and all of these different types of machinery. So for them, it started with a vision, and they made it reality. And this is where imagination becomes reality. It's kind of in line with what I'm talking about. I'll get there. Frank Gehry. He was another one that had these, just, you look at his architecture and you don't even know where it comes from. It's just all over the place. It is... It is just, it doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason to it. It just is. It just exists. Somehow he found a way to make these structures that appear to be so abstract, but he was able to make them sturdy to where they could actually be a building, and where it, you know, was actually safe. How, I don't know, because some of those pieces that he worked on, just incredible. But he's another one that had a vision that was so out of line with what was norm. He just kind of took that to his own, took it to his own next level. And, you know, I mean, gosh, I can't even imagine how much the stuff that he built was worth. Something I gotta say about Christo and Jean-Claude, they did not get funded by government or anything like that, to my knowledge. I don't think that they had any grants. I'm pretty sure that they found a way to fund it themselves. I don't know if it was through private investors or what exactly that was, but whatever they brought to the art, because I mean, steel pieces and the material were worth, I want to say, way upwards in the thousands, maybe the 100,000s. So they were able to bring those materials and really help with the people in the area that they were building these things by giving it back. But they really took it to the next level, you know, in art having an impact on the communities. So, anyway, moving on from that, I just thought it was really cool that they actually funded their own. Again, I can't remember exactly how, but a lot of artists get grants and things like that, and I don't know how they went about it. But if you're interested, you may want to read up on that a little bit. Anyway, moving on. So, imagination gives us a little bit of foresight. So especially when we are reflecting on ourselves, when we are reflecting on the idea of possibilities, and when we're looking at things that don't have any rhyme or reason, like Frank Gehry's architecture, when something seems so out of reach, like Christo and Jean-Claude's artwork, what is it that's going to make these things possible? And how can we take an idea that seems very abstract and put it together to where it's benefiting us in some way? Again, foresight, imagination can give us that. So every single one of us who has some kind of compassion or some kind of empathy, we have sat back and reflected on, if my life was different, I could be fill in the blank. I could be this. If I were born into wealth, I could have X, Y, and Z. If I were born, a lot of us are, you know, a little bit down on ourselves, so some of us would say, if I looked a certain way, I could have this, that, and the other. And we put these conditions on if. What could be if things were different? What if my circumstances were different, or if I were different? Then it comes down to us really analyzing all those things. And I think that a lot of us get into that zone of luck and fate, and what is it that creates us? Is it circumstance? Is it biology? Is it our soul or our spirit? And so kind of just thinking about those things and really just giving some time and thought to it. I think that that has created a lot of us to be very empathetic, because we don't just think about that in terms of ourselves, but we think about it in terms of other people as well. So we think, what is it that made me born as the person I am? My soul. Because, you know, when we cross people, this is another aspect of it that I'm going to probably get into another time, because this is another one that runs kind of deep. But when we cross other people, we don't really stop to consider that they are a soul. And when I started realizing that, that's when I was kind of starting to tune into auras, because I wouldn't see the outside of a person, I would see something else. And so without my glasses, if I'm from a distance, I can actually sometimes kind of identify who people are, maybe by their gait or just something about them. Or if somebody's like looking at me or trying to get my attention or something, because I can't see, I won't usually react, but I'll kind of feel somebody behind me. And that's the same thing in the spirit realm. I have found, if somebody is behind me, but they're not really, if they're not in the flesh, I still feel them. I still experience that. So getting into, let's see, I did want to tie that together real quickly, just because I don't want to completely just derail and then like go off a tangent and then just come back to it. So basically, when I started getting into this concept of, you know, when we pass by somebody, it's not just what we're seeing on the outside. There's a soul. There's a whole story there. And that's when I started to really, really get in tune with my gifts and things like that. So sometimes I would see snippets of things. And when I started really, like, testing it with my friends just for fun, that's when I got the confirmation that, you know, a lot of this was not just in my head. But getting into this idea that we are a soul, we are unique. Where did us come from? Where did we as the individual come from? Is it, was it luck? I don't believe in fate necessarily. I think that things just are, and we do the best we can with it, that we can change it on a dime if we choose. But sometimes it's hard to get there on changing things. We still have to accommodate for circumstances that are not necessarily ideal and things like that. And with biology, I understand biology completely in the sense of I'm going to say the sequence. I don't know how else to put this. I understand that aspect of things. But what is it that made me this conscious, sentient being that I am? This particular person with these particular experiences and these particular thoughts. And with those thoughts, with my experience and the way that I am going through life, with my own interpretation, my own experience, and my own response and reception of things, what is it that made that? Is that truly a soul? I think it is. I don't think there's any other way to explain it. But why did my soul come into this particular body, this particular place? I still don't know. And so this is where we get into this whole concept of fate. This is where I think that people make their own fate. We do the best we can with it. And some of us are fortunate in some ways and some not in others. You know, we have to also consider that money doesn't buy happiness. It doesn't make everything easy. It's just a different type of experience. So now you have different challenges, and those challenges can be just as stressful as somebody who doesn't have as much money. It's just different challenges. And so when we envy things, we're not seeing things for what it is. That's another part of being intuitive. Being able to know that if I stay where I'm at and I don't make any moves at all, and I just keep doing the same thing over and over, I can expect the same results. But how long are those results going to last? Because the world around us changes. Everything around us changes. And how long can we truly expect that to last in a way that that is going to still suit our needs? Sometimes we can't. And I'm going to use this because I know that I use career type stuff a lot when I talk about these things. Career path, that's the word. So if we are at a job and we've been there for 10 years and this other job comes up and we're like, well, you know, I could apply for that, but what if I don't get it? Or what if I get it and I'm not happy? Or what if I get it and it doesn't work out and then I find myself without a job? Sometimes we have to look toward the discomfort to kind of shake things up and break a little bit. And I know that my own journey on this path has led me here. And I was giving this a lot of thought last night. I was like, nothing ever quite went exactly as I had expected it, but it worked out in the way it needed to so that I could be here. Life can change literally overnight. And sometimes it's things that fall into our laps, rarely, but sometimes. I had kept somebody in my life at that time because I knew that I was going to pursue something with them. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was going to be a professional endeavor. And we were on different wavelengths, very, very, very different wavelengths. And I just, you know, kind of continued in that way. Professionally, I kept things professionally because I knew something was going to come of it. Well, something did, but then that didn't quite work out, and it led me to here. So I had no idea. I thought that that was going to be the product of what I was sensing. I didn't realize there was going to be something past that. And then I made the choice to walk away. I still look back and I think, okay, if I had stuck with that professional endeavor, what could have been? And I see these amazing things that would have happened, but things would have been the same. I would not have been getting what I deserved, or I wouldn't have been getting treated fairly, professionally, things like that. So it's just crazy. I had the choice, and I could have chosen either way. I could have even chosen a completely different path than that, but it was something that I jumped on because I wanted it. I could have stuck with retail and kept going to school at the time. So, you know, like I said, fate is what we make of it. I think that we can change any time. And so I kind of sidetracked there for a second. So my point is, we can stay in the same space, but if we do that, and because we're comfortable, what could happen to the situation outside of our control? The company that we're under, could it go bankrupt at some point? Could we lose our hours? Could something happen beyond our control that we find ourselves kind of scrambling to make accommodations for those changes at some point? So sometimes it's not necessarily moving or moving forward or making progress or making change that is going to be the challenge. Sometimes it's staying where we're at. Sometimes staying where we're at feels like the safe thing in the moment, but it can be the riskier thing. So kind of sidestep that whole thing there for a second. Let me get back on track. I even have notes because I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. So who are we if we're not ourselves? This is, I think, part of what it comes down to. The way that we go through life, the way that we make these choices and make these decisions, and we make these decisions sometimes on what is comfortable in the moment. We forget that there are billions of possibilities outside of this one choice. I used to, when I would be driving to work, I would think, I can drive to Florida right now. I've probably mentioned this before if you've kept up with any of my videos, but I could drive to Florida right now. And I could, but my car probably would not have made it. And so this is another thing with being intuitive. Yeah, I can see the obvious. I can see, you know, what might happen, but I have the foresight to step back and say, that's not a good idea. In my youth, I was more impulsive. I didn't think things through. But as I got older, I was able to see that. So when I'm doing readings, I can see the stuff that's not as obvious to some. Sometimes I can see the stuff that's not quite as obvious to myself. Or, you know, with having limited information. But in that aspect, you know, the whole psychic thing and intuitive thing is about being able to step back and look at things objectively. And kind of think about what is a good idea and what isn't. So, could I have driven to Florida? Yes. But would it have been a good idea? No, not at all. And there are billions of other possibilities. So, when we step back and we look at, okay, if I stay where I'm at, what could happen? And we list out the possibilities of what could happen. You know, things may not be perfect, but they could be good for a little while. And my span of thought, or my span of being able to see things, right now it seems to be in a span of 3s. So 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, etc. So I can only see in spans of 3s up to maybe 3 years. 5 is kind of pushing it. 5, I can see kind of where things are leading, but I can't really see beyond that. I can kind of, but by the time 5 years comes along, we've already made different choices. So that comes into the big picture of what I can see, and the way that my whole vision works. So getting back on that, if we look at different paths and we really consider those paths, and we look at the different possibilities, it kind of gives us something to play off on. But we have to be ready to make those changes, and to be uncomfortable, and to accept a challenge, and to know that every path is going to have its own unique set of challenges, no matter what they are. It's just going to be different. And so it's about what challenges we're willing to accept right now in this moment. Also, I'm a hand talker, and I don't know if you can see my shirt, but it says forget about it. So that explains a lot. The hand talking, being Italian, it really is a thing. So, and this is why, like, I kind of try to hone in the video so that you don't see my hands flailing. So, considering possibilities, already got to that. Making us empathetic. Okay, so looking at these possibilities, and also reflecting on all these different versions of ourselves that we could have been in these parallel universes. If I had more money, if I looked a different way, if I was taller, if I was thinner, if I was taller, I could have been a basketball player, if I was thinner, I could have been a model, all these things. I'm a little bit, I know there's got to be a way to do this, to get taller. I'm more concerned with that than getting thinner, and I probably should be working on getting thinner because that's more attainable. But anyway, some things are attainable to us if we care enough to work on it. With my weight, honestly, I haven't really cared enough, and I look at it, this is something else in line with, if I were this, I could be that. If I had really worked on making my physique my main focus, I could have probably been in the movies or a singer. If you don't even have to sing these days, not well anyway, to be a singer. I probably could have been something like that, who knows. But in considering that, I'm not willing to create my whole life around my looks. I'm just not in that place where, you know, I care to do that. My path for me was learning to love myself as I am, and to be accommodating, and to know that it should be a health-based thing, that I should really emphasize my health over my looks. And I try to do that because I've gotten to this point where I love myself as I am, and so it can be a little difficult to want to start working out and eating healthy. But I was not willing to create a physique based on my job or make my life about that. I had a lot of moments where I was depressed about not my weight. I was depressed about what people would say about me. Because I was perfectly fine with myself, but you know, the amount of time that I spent with tears and crying, just now it doesn't seem worth it, but I also know it was necessary for me to be able to love myself to the extent where there's not a thing that anybody can say to bring me down now. It can irritate me, it can upset me, but I won't buy into it. So there's a bit of a difference. Instead of crying about it, I'd be more in that space of reacting like, you're not talking to me, are you? So it's kind of more like that. But, you know, I think that was part of my journey. In the same way that it was, you know, that I had that experience where I knew I was going to be with somebody professionally, and that didn't quite work out in that way, and I ended up here. I think that learning to love myself was part of that journey so that I could be here and I could impart that knowledge from having the actual experience. So instead of dieting, this was part of my lifestyle that brought me to this point. So if we put ourselves, I'm going to jump right back on topic because these are things that are in line with what I'm saying, I promise. But, and if you're there, if you are ready to receive this kind of information, then you already know, you're already understanding where things are going. But when we put ourselves in the shoes of others, because when we do that whole empathetic thing of wondering what it would be like if I were born into a different situation, we also think, how lucky was I to be born in this life? Even if things aren't perfect, chances are, if you are watching this right now or in any way, shape, or form, that you have access to technology, that you have access to resources that can help you in some way. So we look at having the what's the word, the privileges that we have, the look that we have, and even though we may not have it perfect, we can look and say, I'm grateful for this, or I'm grateful for that. And it really helps us to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. And this is, I think, what also helps to kind of get on paths with those gifts, those spiritual gifts. If only I could read my writing. I already covered that. Already covered if the lines blur, is it circumstance or is it self? Where does it come from? I already covered that. So then I think I talked about the different versions of ourselves. So if we have gone through this whole entire concept, we may have even looked at, I could have been born in a situation where it was a lot more difficult, or where I didn't have this person with me, or where I didn't have that person with me. It can make us more grateful for those little things. So I thought about this. I was like, maybe I should write just on one side, because when I flip this little book, I don't know which side is which, but I do know where I'm at because of the page. I did number them. I had the foresight to do that because I know how my brain works, and I've used these before. But I think that next time I should just do one side, and then after that mark it out, and then use the back for a different one, so I'm not wasting my little booklet, because it is a nice little booklet. It's kind of like one of those index card type things, and it has a thing where you can put a little picture if you so choose. Anyway, back to topic. So how can you utilize this? And the whole point that I was getting to with art, imagination can be strong. It can be everything. It can be so real that, does it really matter sometimes if it's real or not? Maybe not. Um, not if you can take that and utilize it in some way, because everything had to start somewhere. Frank Gehry, how did he come up with these things? We'll look at Mozart too. He's another one. How did he come up with these I don't want to call them songs, but I will for lack of a better word at this point. How did he come up with these songs at such a young age? And not only does it require, the imagination, but also the skills, the knowledge, and the talent, because, writing music is no small feat. He must have just really had something going for him, because he was a genius with that. I mean, to be so young. Frank Gehry would have to have some knowledge of architecture, or at least have a team with him. There's another one. I hope I say his name right. Is it Chuli? The glass artist. There was a point where he became blind, and had to have people help him. He had other crafters work on the pieces, and piece by piece by piece they would put them together and create these elaborate glass pieces that were just absolutely incredible, just stunning. And I think he could see just enough to know if he liked something or not. So just to have that incredible imagination to be able to put things together, and he had a whole school for that as well. So that was like his thing. Jean-Claude and Christo, that's another one that I mentioned earlier. What kind of imagination must they have to bring something like that to reality? Not only to think about it. So many of us think about it, but how many of us actually do something that we're thinking about? And that's really the first step. If we're looking at people that have it easy, if we're looking at people that are successful or get rich off an idea, they did not come up with that overnight. It was a process. I can assure you, it was a process. So a lot of times we're looking at, how people could have it easier, or, we're stuck in all these comparisons, and it's so not fair to any of us to do that to ourselves. But what is it that's going to take that imagination and implement it into reality? I get lazy with my speech sometimes. Have to consult with my notes. So now really sit back and think about all the different things that you want, those things that you have been looking for in your life. Success, knowledge, job change, career choices. If you want a family, or if you want to find a significant other that matches what you want, or matches who you are, or I do want to mention this. This is for another topic, but if we're looking for a significant other, we also have to be open to the idea that it's not about finding somebody to mold to who we are, but somebody that is aligned with who we are, so that we're not changing them and they're not changing us, and so that we kind of meet in the middle. And so whatever we're looking for, what is it going to take to get there? What is it going to take to start on that path of making things happen? And I'm going back to a lot of things, actually. I'm going back to those different versions of ourselves. Whatever it is that we want, take a moment and reflect on the version of ourselves that we said, if I was more this, I could be this. I'm going to give an example here. A lot of times we want to be more this or more that or more whatever it is. And I'll give my own example. I wanted to be healthier. I actually quit smoking a couple weeks ago, so that's a good thing. But I wanted to, and that's mostly because I got the braces, and, you know, smoking with braces just isn't a good thing. But I wanted to be healthier. So I thought about all those times that I thought about the version of me out there that was thinner and was born with a better genetic chemistry. And I knew that if I was born into that version of my biological self, I would not be this spiritual self. I would be a totally different soul. I would not be sitting here talking to you. It would be somebody else doing something else, probably, I don't know, volleyball at this point, or something more athletic, if I was born with a set of genetics that were healthier. So I went and I chatted with this version of myself in a deep meditation, and I was like, just sitting there asking, you know, okay, what do I need to do? And this version was telling me things such as, you know, that she understood where I was coming from, that I didn't need to be down on myself, that this was just something that she enjoyed. This was what worked for her. She enjoyed working out. She enjoyed exercise and eating healthy, and that I deserved that for myself if I so chose. But she also understood that not everybody was in line with that lifestyle. So I didn't feel judged by my parallel universe self. I felt comfortable talking to her. And I said, okay, well, what can I do? And this was, I would say, a few months back, because I did go into a healthy diet kick at that time, but also when, you know, COVID came, I wasn't able to get the fresh produce, which I've talked about that a lot because it really frustrates me that, you know, I wasn't able to continue, because for all these years, almost 40 years, I have been just doing my own thing when it comes to food. And all of a sudden I was like, I'm going to make these changes. And then it was like the world was against me. But at that time, I was talking to this version, and I asked, what is it that I can do for myself to make this more attainable? And I was given the advice, you know, start small, just find things that you enjoy. Try something new. Fruits and veggies. Try something new or something different, or different flavor combinations. You already kind of know what you like anyway, so, you know, build upon that. Grapes and cheese will make you feel fancy. Drinking my juice out of wine glasses like I always do. Or instead of, you know, just drinking my soda, and I've done this for years, have my little wine glass and drink the, it's still soda, but it's more like the peach and Italian type sodas, stuff like that. But it'll make you feel like you're having more of a treat, and it won't make you feel like you're totally depriving yourself. You're going to feel like you're treating yourself more and better, rather than drinking 6 sodas a day. So, you know, just those little things to make yourself feel more decadent, to make yourself feel more like you're doing something more for yourself. And with exercise, I don't know if I ever got to that point with her. I should probably go back in that meditation and find out. But so that's one thing. So then I went and in the meditation, I went to the wrong door, and there was a version of me that was like a mermaid, because obviously I like my marine life. And I'm like, oh, sorry, wrong door, which happens in meditation sometimes. I think I did stay in chat a while. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, but I don't know if that would be the life that I'd want all the time. So then I went to the door of me that was totally professional, totally opposite of what I look like now. Very highly educated, very highly successful, very like super professional, a little bit intimidating to talk to, because that's totally not who I am. Not in this life anyway. And so I was like just in awe, like, how did this version of me even come to exist? This is so opposite. And that one was just basically saying, if you want something, you have to go for it, and that's it. No other way around it. You get it done, you find a way. There's going to be obstacles in your way. You just got to keep going no matter what. And that is where you need to be. Just don't give up. And so that one was a little bit more intimidating, I think, because that came from a place of not giving up and just, not making excuses. I'm used to making excuses for myself. So that intimidated me a little bit, to be honest. So, I'm used to making those excuses and saying, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, so this is why I did not, it can be from the big things or the small things, whatever. I would just, no matter what it was, I'm like a billion things are going through my mind of every excuse I've ever made for myself and why I'm having no progress now. So that one was a little bit intimidating. And you could tell, like, the one thing that each version of who I am is even when that version of me felt intimidating, I was not truly intimidated because I felt that version of me was still approachable. That version of me wanted the best for me. So I guess it was because it was reflecting on my own shortcomings. And so that was one thing that I still felt, but still felt like I was kind of out of sync. And I know, the super artsy version, that was more in line with who I am now. That one was just kind of like, hey, come in. Come and have a chat, just, and then I think that, honestly, I think that in that meditation, I was kind of left there to sit on the couch for a little bit and kind of look at stuff, all the artwork that was like all over the walls, and then it was like, oh, I made some tea, here you go, just random stuff with that one. That one was too much me. And so that one was, how do you exist this way? How are you able to do this? And I don't think there was any clear answer other than, it wasn't about the money. So, which is, kind of funny in a way because, yeah, that's kind of who I am now. But it was a little bit different because that version made their entire life off of art. That was it. It was like living and breathing it completely and all that kind of stuff. So what can we gain from these different versions of ourselves that we've already created, that we've already said, if I was X, Y, and Z, I could be A, B, and C. I'm working backwards there. I should have said A, B, C first. But anyway, what can we gain? What can we have from a conversation with these different versions if we go through a meditation? And I think that, being that I did sense that approachability and that calm and that desire for me to, no matter which version I was, for me to be my best, then what is it that I would glean from their advice? But it was still me underneath it all. It was still the approachable version that I know, and I was still giving myself compassion. This is something that when it comes to childhood healing and stuff like that, this is something that I do myself, because when we look at things on the outside, everything's about us. Everything is about me. We don't think about what is happening outside of ourselves. So we reflect so hard on our experience that we're not looking at the big picture. Let's go ahead and use Eminem as the example. The song Stan, everybody knows that song. It's a great song. The part where he was saying that Eminem didn't even sign his cap for his little brother. And he watched the video, and in the song, you listen to the song. So this is one perspective. You listen to the song, and you think that Eminem just blew him off, is the impression that you get. And, I think it's also interesting that Eminem is playing both roles of, himself and Stan. So you don't quite know You know, why would he call himself out like that? But at any rate, that's the whole thing with literary analysis and being able to kind of have the, what is it called? I think it's the foresight or the omniscience or whatever. Anyway, so we know, or we assume that he just blew him off. When we watch the video, Eminem's just minding his own business and he gets tackled by a bunch of fans. So it was not what it seemed at all. If we take a while to message somebody back, sometimes it's not anything to do with us blowing somebody off, but rather it comes down more to we're looking at ourselves and thinking, oh God, did I say something wrong? Rather than thinking, oh, they're probably busy. And that's another thing with the whole psychic thing that really allowed me to understand that people have things going on. They don't have time sometimes to get back to me, or even if I don't hear from them for weeks, they'll get back to me and be like, I am so sorry. I got really busy. I understand. Couple weeks go by, you must have been really busy. I get it, seriously. But it gave me the foresight to know that they're doing something else and I am not the center of their world and they got things that they're dealing with. So it helped me to relax a little bit. But this is something that when we look at it in that way, that there was more to the big picture, there was more going on. When we didn't feel protected as children, it's the same thing. There was more to that story. We were still being protected. We were still being spoken for in different ways that we may not have seen at the time. And so we carry this with us. And sometimes, again, there's just so much more to it. So when it comes to parallel selves, sometimes we can do this whole time travel thing, time travel in quotations, and go back to our childhood self, have that long talk with our childhood self about, you know what, you were always worth it. You know, it was never that you were not worth it. It was that you were seeing one side of things. And that, you know, it wasn't that you were being forgotten. It wasn't that you were being ignored. Or if you were, that was on somebody else. They had their own thing that they were going through. And, you know, a lot of times we try to brush things off and say, well, it's this person's loss if they didn't want to be in our lives or whatever. But do we ever truly embrace that? Not really. Sometimes we have to go back to our childhood self and have this long talk with them and say, you know what, I'm an adult now. Because as children, we see adults as the protector, really. And so, you know, when it comes to healing those childhood wounds of being bullied, when it comes to all of those things, we can go back and say, hey, you know what? I got your back now. Even though I can't do much now, I can sit here and I can, you know, pep talk you. And somehow it brings you up to this moment here where we can shed that and we can have those moments where we're just, you know, in tears and we're like, you know what? Okay, I get it. And it's going to be okay. And my childhood self is doing better now, better than ever, because I see things in a whole different way. So I think I pretty much covered everything. Basically just, you know, look into those different aspects of yourself. Who are you? Is it circumstance? Is it biology? Does it matter? You know, all those questions of I could have been this, I could have been that, etc., etc. Think about those versions of yourself, because you've created them in your imagination to make them just as real as the artists that I mentioned, the people that have taken that to the next level and taken something that comes sheerly out of imagination, has nothing to do with anything, and they made something out of nothing. They invented something. Even grammar, even speech, even math, it all has to come from somewhere, and I would imagine that in some way it would have to come from imagination, especially grammar. Yeah, there's a lot of rules with it, but it's not real. It was a construct that somebody kind of invented. Even science is a theory. There's no real... you know, they talk about scientific proof, but at the same time they say it's a theory, and those theories can change at any time. So, I mean, that's kind of like in this blurred line. Even math is considered a theory. So, you know, just all these different things come into the big picture. What's real, what's not, and how can we make that work for us? And that's the main thing. If it is working to your benefit, does it really matter? Does it really matter? And so this is like what I deal with every day, my abstract thoughts. What is real, what is not? I don't know. How do I bring imagination to the forefront? How do I make it real? And, you know, everybody who's ever done anything memorable or anything interesting or whatever you want to call it, they have all put that effort in. One by one, they have put one foot in front of the other and put in the work to make things happen. And that's, I think, what we need to remember. How do we manifest imagination to reality? We got to start somewhere. So have those conversations with your parallel selves. Have those epiphanies along the way. Just see what can happen, see where things can take you if you really start to delve into the possibilities that are around you, because they are vast and limitless, and limiting ourselves with anything is really a disservice to ourselves. If you want to go back to school, see what it takes to get there. Or if you want to create a piece of art, or you know, those books that you've been talking about finishing reading or starting reading, you got to start somewhere. And that's, I think, another perfect example. You got to start somewhere. Until you crack open a page, you're not going to finish that book, or make any progress. Or, you know, for me, I start reading a whole bunch of books, and then I like stop after the first few pages. I'm like, this is great. And then I get bored with it and I put it back and get another. So that's a bad habit. But anyway, I hope that helped in some way. I hope that you're able to utilize that for yourself. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me if you're in my group. If you're on YouTube, you can find me on Gothic Genie's self-empowerment group. If I do answer questions, just for fun, it'll be in that group. Otherwise, you can book a session with me, gothicgenieinsights@gmail.com. I am on Instagram. I don't really use a lot because of the scammers. And basically, if you search Gothic Genie Insights, you'll pretty much find me. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will catch up with y'all later.